I finished the ABS delete on the car. Here's what it looks like. That's for the front brakes right there, a little T, and then the back brake proportioning valve. I'm gonna make a bracket that goes from that nut, just make a little sheet metal bracket to come over here and hold that. I mean, nothing's hitting. I mean, it kind of looks like it is from the video, but none of that's hidden, and it really doesn't bounce around that much. But yeah, this don't move at all hardly. This one moves a little, but I mean, it doesn't bounce on each other or anything. But when I did this, I bought a little kit thing that screwed into here that had the hoses, and I just ran the hoses up real high so nothing would come out of master cylinder. And I just bent the lines. There was plenty of extra line to do all that. Over here's all the extra. That extra piece, that extra piece, that one, and this one over here. And here's the ABS module out of the car. You have the 3 outs, and then the 2 from the master cylinder in over here, and then there's a plug in there, plug in there, plug in there, and there's a big plug in down here. But all you do is take that bolt out, and it just slides out this side. You just pull it this way, and it slides right out. Of here, there's where the bolt went, right there, and then just slid out of that bracket. But I'm not going to show a video on all the flaring and stuff like that, because there's a million videos of that online. But I will show you some things that I learned along the way, because this is the first time I've ever done this. Like I said before, there's different nuts and different fittings for different types of flares. There's the bubble flare, which my car had to the master cylinder, and then there's the double flare. Let's see if I can zoom in on that. That was a practice flare that I had done, just practicing. If I can get it to zoom. Anyway. When you do these flares, here's a little cheap tool I used. It kind of sucks for doing the still lines, which come factory on the car. Those hydraulic ones work a lot better, but I couldn't see paying $200–300 just to do flaring. But anyway, this end, this side, which has the numbers on it, has the beveled in. There's a little bevel right there, and that's the side that you got a flare on. But you just stick this up in the hole for whatever size. That's a 3/16 line. Stick it up in the 3/16 hole, and then these are the pieces that flared the first flare, which is kind of like a bubble flare, but this isn't a true real bubble flare. When you do it with this, there's actually another kit that you're supposed to use to do. I mean, it'll make somewhat what looks identical to a bubble flare, but I was watching videos on YouTube, and some people said that it's fine doing a bubble flare like that, and then someone said don't do a bubble flare with a double flare tool. So I don't know, but anyway, let me see if I can, let me get this stuck in here. Alright, I grabbed the one that wasn't already flared. One of the old pieces I had that wasn't flared already, just to go over this a little bit. Like I said, there's 1,000 videos online, but You put that in the corresponding hole, 3/16. That's what that is, 3/16 there. Then you get your little 3/16 die here, whatever you call it. You want that flat shoulder to be even with, or maybe I found that going just a little bit lower is actually better. And then you stick that in the hole. Then you put your tool on there. So there's the tool on there. Something that I found that helps is after you cut the line with your little cutter tool, you just put this cutter tool on there. The line goes, you know, right in that groove, and then that cuts it. But you just put it in there and you finger tighten this, and you just spin it, spin it, spin it. You'll feel it start to loosen up. When it does, you just finger tighten this again. Don't go crazy on this with a wrench or anything, just finger tighten it. Keep turning it. Starts to feel loose as you're turning it. Tighten it up more, spin it again. Eventually it cuts through it, but it does leave a little burr on the side. So what I did, you know, this one's already flared, but just think of it if it wasn't flared already. But I took a file and kind of hit the edges and kind of angled it in. So, you know, using the file straight up and down, like if my finger here was the file, then I'd go, you know, like that. This phone does not like to focus, but anyway, I used the file all the way around like that and kind of beveled the edges. And then it would burr up the hole too, so I found a drill bit that would just fit in that hole, and I kind of drilled the hole out. And then I would even file across the top of it like this to make sure it was good and flat and everything was deburred. That helped a lot. So now when you tighten this up, you want to make sure that this, see how it's crooked right now. So you want to kind of you have to move this around and tighten this nut up at the same time you're holding this from, you know, and make sure that that goes straight down on there. It's really important that that goes straight down. I had a hard time turning this with a ratchet, holding this and trying to keep this all straight at the same time, because when you get lower down in there, you're turning it pretty hard. Now this piece right here is supposed to go into a vise, you know, right there. But when you're working inside the car, you don't have that option. So what I did on this one is I took an impact and I put the impact on there and I just barely tapped the trigger, just a little at a time. That way it was a lot easier to hold this and keep it straight. That's probably not the right way to do it, but I mean, I didn't want to, that'll only go down so far. And the most important thing is to keep that straight as it goes down. Because if you don't, then your holes are going to be all crooked. You're going to have more meat on one side than you're going to have on the other side. And when you do the other flare, then it's not going to be straight. But that's what I did. And I just took the impact and I just barely tap, make sure it's straight, barely tap. It was a lot easier to hold everything straight. And then you want that, you know, all the way down till it gets flush with the tool. And also another thing, I didn't tighten this up all the way, but when you tighten this bolt up and this bolt up, when you first put the line in there, make sure that this, because there's some play there, make sure that when you tighten it up, is nice and flat all the way across. And that helps a lot too. But anyway, after you do that die all the way down and you get what looks like a bubble flare, then you go for the double flare. You take that out and it'll be sunk down in the hole in the bevel there all the way, and it'll somewhat look like a bubble flare, just like that, down in the hole. Then you take that piece off, and then you just stick this piece directly in the hole. And then you tighten that up until you get you a good little flare. flared out to double flare it, kind of like that. I didn't really go deep enough with that one. That one probably should have went a little deeper, but that was just a practice one. The other ones I was able to go deeper with. Now, when you do that die, I didn't use, because you have to be real careful when you do this one. So you don't go too far and tighten it too tight, because if you tighten it too tight, then you'll split it. Because it's going to look like that when you stick it down, and then you stick that piece there, 20 in, down in that hole to get your double flare. If you go too far, it'll start splitting, but you want to go far enough that it's going to catch the ledge inside the fittings. But yeah, this, when you do the pointy end, you don't have to worry so much about it staying straight, because it stays straight by itself. And then you know, you just put it right down in the hole and you tighten it up, and it'll make that double flare. And yeah, that's how I did the flaring on them, and it turned out pretty good. Now, another pointer I wanted to point out is when I tighten these up, you know, I used an adjustable wrench to hold on to the fittings, and then I tightened the nuts up with a regular wrench. Gravity bled the brakes. I went driving around, and every single one of them, it didn't spray fluid out, but it weeped eventually after, you know, I drove like an hour. I drove an hour to Lexington to like a little Cars coffee show, and then I drove an hour home, and it was pretty wet around every one of those fittings. Now, it wasn't spraying out. It wasn't, the brakes were still working good, but it was weeping out. I guess that's the word that you would use. So my advice, what I did was I went to Harbor Freight and I bought some of these flare wrenches, and these made a huge difference. And what I did was I tightened them all down. I'd tighten them down, and I'd back it off a little, and I'd tighten it down, back off. I probably did that 5 or 6 times, and then got a good snug tighten on it with these flare wrenches I got from Harbor Freight for like 15 bucks. And that was it. They don't leak at all. Now, I gravity bled it some more, and then it still felt like it had some air in it. So my uncle came over, and we did the old way of doing it. Someone pumps up the pedal and then holds it, and the other one cracks the bleeder, and do that over and over. And actually, the only one that I got air out of was the first one I did, the back rear tire. But now I'm still having an issue I've always had with this car. I mean, it stops fine, but if you ever have to slam on the brakes to stop and stop in a hurry, it will not stop in a hurry. So, and the pedal's nice and hard, and all the fluid's out, so I think that brake booster is bad. So today, I'm going to replace that brake booster. And also, I was working on my ram air a little bit. I put that on there, and then ran that black pipe down to the hole in the fog light hole. But to get the velocity stack in there, velocity stack won't fit in there. So I'm going to have to cut that out a little bit to get the velocity stack in there. So I'm going to work on all that today. But that's where I'm at.